Hello. Hello, everyone. I hope you all can hear me well. I see everyone is joining already. For those who haven't met me yet, I am Julia. I'm the Client Success Director at TrendWatching, and it's my pleasure to host you today together with Vicki. So today we have our webinar. We are expecting more than 100 people from all over the globe. So we're very happy to have you all here. Thank you all for joining, for taking the time to go through this session. Just small housekeeping notes. We will keep the chat closed during the session so everyone can really focus on the content, but we will have an opportunity by the end of the session for questions and answers. You feel free also to add to the Q&A button at the bottom your questions if you have any during the session. And yeah, without much further ado, I would like to ask Vicki to take the stand.
Hey, thank you so much, Julia, and thank you everyone for joining. So today we're going to be talking through the most recent FastForward editions, the last three reports, in fact. So I have kind of pulled together some slides. I don't know if you have ever seen me present before or if you've ever joined a webinar. I always have too many slides and not enough time. So let's see how we go today. But I'm going to hopefully go through these three FastForward reports. And as Julia said, we'll have time at the end for questions. On the off chance that I don't talk as much as I usually do, and we might finish a little bit early. So let's see how we're going. But yeah, just to echo Julia, thank you so much for joining today. Great to see you virtually. But like I said, lots of content to go on with, so let me just get to it. So I'm going to be talking through these three reports: Spontainment, Gather Ground, and Sacred Sync. And so let's just jump straight into Spontainment. So this was the first report in the Experience Deficit series. And really, this whole report you can sum up with one insight, with one sentence, which is that the unexpected has been optimized away. But please don't leave, because lots more insights. What am I really saying here, right? The hippocampus, which is the part of the brain that is crucial for memory and learning, shows enhanced neural activity when we encounter unexpected events, right? This helps create sort of stickier memories. But in the truth, people experience way less surprise than before, right? Many people read reviews before booking, look on Google Maps before arriving, map routes before they walk. In fact, half of Gen Z say that their For You page knows them better than their parents do. So it's hard to truly be surprised. So enter spontainment. These are experiences that are designed to recreate spontaneity through controlled surprise. Now, I don't mean chaos. This is kind of curated unpredictability within sort of safe parameters. So think Pop Mart's blind boxes, right? I mean, they generated, I think, 1.8 billion in sales, according to the Financial Times, maybe more at this point. Consumers don't know what is inside them, but they know that they're probably going to like it, right? It's a surprise with kind of known quantities. So let's dive into what is kind of driving this trend, okay? So many things from essays to image creation are being outsourced to AI. One UK study found that 92% of students use AI, up from 66% in 2024. In many cases, AI isn't necessarily assisting, it's sometimes replacing the processes of like learning, creating, problem solving. And while there are, of course, many convenience and democratization benefits here, it feels like the hidden cost is satisfaction itself. This is something that the economist Kyla Scanlon, I think I'm saying that right, calls the simulation economy, right? One that doesn't just keep people glued to their screens, but convinces them that real world effort is obsolete. Meanwhile, platforms like Netflix, YouTube, and Amazon Prime have made their services kind of effortless, right? Perfect recommendations, seamless streaming, no interruptions. But now Netflix wants to use the technology that powered that recommendation engine to put ads at emotional peak points. So imagine, crying at a movie scene and getting McDonald's ad, right? Not hating on McDonald's, just saying that might jar a little bit. Discord is experimenting with ads that blend into conversations. And this playbook is kind of a bit simple and cynical at the same time, right? So first, make these products so effortless and easy to use that people kind of become dependent on them, then make enjoyment a little bit painful by adding in these points of friction that didn't really exist before. And then, of course, charge people to remove those pain points. And the truth is that many consumers aren't necessarily upgrading for better features. Instead, they're upgrading to remove these kind of artificial pain points that didn't exist until companies put them there. And in that backlash, there is an opportunity. People will gravitate towards brands that create genuine delight rather than engineer frustration. And finally, let's think about play. Children spend 50% less time outdoors than a generation ago. Lots of reasons for that, but this decline in playtime is resulting in a generation that is more comfortable with scheduling. One survey found that less than 1 in 10 young adults make spontaneous plans. And of course, telling young adults, telling young people, even telling older adults to be more playful, that's not really helpful. Instead, there's a real opportunity for brands to create specific moments where, silliness is encouraged, or, sort of getting out your side of your comfort zone is encouraged. And let's not forget that the sense of sameness, permeates many digital and real world experiences. 84% of affluent travelers say luxury hotels feel too beige. They believe that hotels focus too much on being Instagram ready rather than authentic. And when everything is optimized for social media, for example, nothing really feels genuine anymore. And there are some interesting kind of cultural signs of this emerging. The chicken jockey trend, look, a year ago, I didn't think I'd be saying those two words together, started when Gen Z Minecraft fans turned a line from the Minecraft movie starring, you just saw that little clip of it there. What began as kind of an sort of trailer edit ended up on TikTok and escalating into cinema chaos, right? With teens shouting and throwing popcorn during movie showings. And it was kind of mischievous behavior, meme-driven audience participation, but also creating quite a lot of hassle for some of the theatres, actually. So, the flip side of spontaneous. Other sort of signals, parents are embracing kid rotting, which is letting kids be bored during their holidays. Shocker. Or in China, Chinese travelers are booking trips within a month of departure. So the backlash against optimization has begun. So as always, the reports include 5 or 6 kind of real world innovations. I'm not going to go through every innovation now, just because we don't really have time, and also because it's probably more useful for you to download the PDF and kind of page through at your own time. So I'm just going to present kind of maybe 4 from this one, and so do go back and check the full report. But let's just cover a couple here. The first innovation, Heineken Malaysia, they launched something called Refreshing Sessions. These were pop-up music events that were all designed to connect strangers. So the first thing was that they did them in kind of surprising places, in a gym, in a bookstore, in a supermarket. And then they also had a partnership with an app called Time Left, which matched attendees with new people. So encouraging you to get to know people that you didn't come with. So a couple of things here, right? There are sort of underutilized spaces like gyms and supermarkets and bookstores where people can connect with each other. And we'll talk a lot more about connection and community in the next trend, actually. So maybe there's an opportunity to think about how recontextualizing familiar spaces as stages for unexpected encounters could help transform something mundane into something surprising. And then one of the other innovations on this slide is from Puma. They elevated early morning runs. So they launched something what they called the 5 a.m. high drops activation. The clue is in the name. So what they did was they rewarded people who went running at 5 a.m. by leaving free pairs of new running shoes at select locations in select cities around the world. So you had to check their Instagram channel to discover the secret locations and then be among the first to reach them to claim the shoes. And this isn't really about creating a new behavior. It's really about sort of gamifying something that many people were already doing. So sometimes the best activation doesn't always require behavior change, just behavior elevation. So is there some kind of customer ritual that you could transform, sorry, into a sort of mini adventure? And just two more innovations. I really love this one from Bad Bunny. So he as part of the promotions for a new album, he invited fans to unlock the track list through a global treasure hunt. And so it replaced song titles on Spotify with GPS coordinates, and then you had to put them into Google Maps to find hidden track names. And they were basically all hidden across locations in Puerto Rico. And so fans from obviously, Bad Bunny is this huge global artist. So it drew fans from all over the world to participate in this treasure hunt. And it's a really interesting play, inviting people, fans, to work for access. It gives them, the chance to kind of team up with people that they maybe didn't know. And it would be really interesting to think about, obviously, there's a digital activation, but what this might look like in a real world space as well. And then the final innovation I'll just quickly talk through is perhaps a bit of a surprising one. So it's from the Victoria and Albert Museum, who are based in London. They recently opened a big new kind of add-on, which is actually located in the former Olympic Park from when London hosted the Olympics. But their whole thing is all about, with this new setup, is about thinking about how to get more people to engage with museums, how to kind of shed that sort of stuffy image that sort of heritage and legacy museums like the V&A can have. So they have thousands and thousands, I think it's like 250,000 artifacts. And they have a really interesting order and object feature that lets you kind of book an appointment. So you can request to view a specific item from the collection, and a kind of a mechanical arm goes away, picks it up for you, and then brings it to you. And so it turns it into this personalized discovery experience. Rather than you just kind of walking around and peering into glass cabinets, it kind of brings things that you are interested in to you. Really, it's all about like creating your own mini exhibition. And so, what is this doing? It's kind of changing that curator-visitor relationship. Visitors become those sort of temporary curators in some ways. So just kind of an interesting way to think about here about how you can, maintain authority, but also give audiences agency over their journey. And look, the key insight here, as we said at the start, is people have optimized away their own ability to be surprised. Brands can step in here, and this isn't about abandoning efficiency. I'm not saying let's, be spontaneous when people are trying to check out to buy toilet paper, but it's about thinking about strategic friction that really creates delight. And inside the report, you'll find this prompt worksheet. We called it the Spontainment Starter Kit, that will help you start to thinking about how to apply this concept. And then the full PDF also includes kind of sector-specific applications across like healthcare, education, and so on. Okay, one down. Let's move on to Gather Ground, which is the second report. So Spontainment was all about optimizing away surprise. Gather Ground is about rebuilding genuine connection. It's all about kind of community and a new take on community. And obviously the community word has become a bit of a buzzword over the last kind of 20 or so years. We've been tracking it for a long time at TrendWatching. Back in 2010, we identified a trend called tribe factoring, which was all about consumers seeking brands that reflected their identity. In 2019, we have Village Squared, which was all about brands opening spaces to combat loneliness. Costa Coffee had these chatter and natter tables. I don't know if anyone remembers them. Then 2022, we had Niche Nets, which was all about micro communities online. Now in 2025, we have Gather Ground. And this isn't really about brands building for communities, it's also about communities building for themselves. And so this is the fundamental shift, right? Communities have moved beyond just meeting up. They're co-creating kind of physical environments that are shaped by their own needs and values. This isn't passive participation, it's active construction. They want what we often term fourth spaces, not just a place to hang out, but places for active participation, for skill sharing, for making something together. And really, the chance to be a contributor, not just a customer, is really central to genuine belonging. And of course, the big overarching driver here is loneliness. Lots of talk about that over the last few years. I'm sure you've all seen stats like this. 20% of people across 13 countries feel lonely or often. 56% have felt lonely at least sometimes. Young people are the most affected. But here's the thing, okay, 63% of people who have meaningful connections feel happier. So it turns out that the antidote to loneliness isn't more content or better algorithms, it's genuine connection. And increasingly, people are realizing that traditional third spaces and brand built communities maybe aren't providing that. And at the same time, we have to factor in the changing attitudes towards social media, right? So platforms like Facebook and so on promised connection, but ended up delivering consumption, right? Platforms that were supposed to bring people together have now been content feeds that are optimized for engagement. This has sort of created this big gap, right? People want this connection, but the digital tools also aren't delivering it. And so there's been a lot of talk as well over the last year about how Gen Z in particular are taking the quest for community offline. Across the globe, Gen Z are joining running clubs, they're attending like coffee raves, they're attending in-person chess clubs. This is happening in, all sorts of cities across the world. And the emphasis on joy and connection, not necessarily output. And I just want to say that this is quite a break from sort of millennial hobby energy, where millennials were encouraged to monetize their hobbies, right? You couldn't just knit because you liked it, you had to knit because you were going to sell it on Etsy as well. I'm not saying that younger consumers aren't monetizing their hobbies, but they're also looking for hobbies as a place to kind of just find connection. It doesn't have to be a project, right? They want a space where being together is the point, not necessarily the product. One final shift to consider is that, more than 50% of Netflix subscribers tune into anime. Now, that has caused some Reddit users to be, a little bit disappointed. They are all normies now. It's horrifying. Um, why am I showing you this? Because it's just a great example of how something fundamental has shifted, right? Digital platforms promised niches, but in the end, they delivered homogenization, right? When everything scales infinitely online, subcultures, they end up losing the things that made them special. What do I mean by that? Like insider language, shared jokes, shared references, that sense of being part of something. Like that is increasingly lost now when so many people can find things out online. And that is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's just kind of changed the nature of the subculture. Um, some data from Spotify seems to confirm this. 80% of US Gen Z say niche and underground culture is going mainstream. Similar numbers in the UK and Australia agree. And that same survey found that I think it was 74% of Gen Z labeled themselves as mainstream, up from 58, 59% in 2021. So becoming more mainstream is, or labeling yourself as mainstream is also becoming more common. And so we're starting to see communities move offline in a bid to make them help them kind of reclaim what originally made them feel special. So what might this look like? I'm actually going to talk through all of these three innovations because I think they all kind of show different things. So the first one is Saucy Books. This is a romance dedicated bookshop that recently opened in London, and it is all built on the success of BookTok, and particularly kind of some of the themes that run through Book Talk, cowboys, enemies to lovers, romantasy. I'm not sure if these words mean anything to anyone that is listening, but if you are in Book Talk, they definitely will. So yeah, this is a sort of romance dedicated bookshop. It's decked out in a really nice way. They have kind of deck chairs, parasols. There is what they call a smut hut featuring erotic fiction. And the idea is that it's a space for the book talk community to gather. And the founder said that, there is still a lot of snobbishness about these kinds of types of fiction. And it was about, helping people kind of come together in the real world to share their love of it. And look, book clubs are one of the things that Gen Z have gravitated towards. Some of them now come with add-ons as well, like wine tastings or crafting. Um, Saucy Books kind of follows this to the logical conclusion. It's kind of a bookstore that is also kind of an experience center. This is what happens when kind of book culture becomes three-dimensional. The next innovation is from a fashion brand called Telfar, and this is their first kind of brick and mortar store. But I want to highlight that it isn't just a place to shop, it is also a community hub. So it has a public access TV station. There are gathering spaces that can be reconfigured in different ways. And interactive screens where people can record content and then like play it in the store. When they launched it or when they were kind of building it, they described it as like a gift to the brand's loyal fan base. And so, lots of kind of interesting things to think about here from a sort of retail space point of view. They really understand their community, its interests, motivations, and have created this store that prioritizes participation as well as purchase. So I think a question to think about here is, what happened if you stopped selling to your community and then, started solving for what is missing for them? And then last but by no means least, on this slide, in Singapore, a laundromat is kind of an unlikely place to meet up. So you might think on Valentine's Day, young people in Singapore would go to a cocktail bar, but no, they were hanging out at the local laundromat because it was turned into a dating mixer. And it's all from a company called Hangout Laundry, which is all about kind of reimagining what it means to wash your clothes. It's a cafe as well. It's a co-working space. It's kind of this multi-function space that serves a community need in terms of like a practical need, somewhere to wash your clothes, but also a community need as well. And I think the truth is that corporate third spaces feel forced, and that is often because they are. This was never meant to become necessarily a community hub. It kind of emerged because it sat at those intersections of clean clothes, human connection, and community. So, community spaces can really grow from needs. So do check out the rest of the report for some more innovations. We also have sober golf and noon voyages. And then also in the report, there are some action steps for brands to think about when navigating this shift. Things like starting with what's needed, not what's branded. Remember that influence doesn't equal invitation, support doesn't always look like a strategy, and belonging isn't a brand asset you can own. So these are just some guidelines to think about. Which actually does bring us to an interesting point. Not every space does need a brand in it. Which spaces will welcome you and which ones won't, right? As consumers and communities tire of being managed and monetized, they're kind of going to want to do it more on their own terms. Maybe go smaller, maybe take it slower. And so some spaces will welcome brands and others won't. And, knowing where to show up and when to step back is probably like the hardest part of this trend. And moving on to the final report in the series, I hope you are all still with me. We've just got one more to go. So this is the most recently published report. It was published just a couple of weeks ago. And this is called Sacred Sync. And this tackles a different kind of deficit, really. The search for meaning, an increasingly shallow world, and how ritual is kind of being redesigned. And his sort of a couple of stats that kind of really set up this theme, right? Self-care culture promised relief from burnout, but global happiness has declined since 2011 in 15 of 20 countries. Over a third of young adults across the globe had deep fears about the future. It turns out that treat culture and wellness apps aren't really solving fundamental problems. They are just adding noise to an already overwhelming world. Many deliver just distraction and not depth. We talked about a little bit about that in Spontainment when we were discussing how attitudes towards social media have changed. And for those that are looking for more meaning, the answer isn't necessarily more products. It's about like more practice. It's about kind of getting to know themselves better, creating new rituals, thinking about what works, what traditions they want to tap into. This isn't really about buying into complete spiritual systems, instead about people choosing what works for them personally. One kind of interesting stat that came out of this research found came from McKinsey, sorry, that found that Gen Z is approximately 3 times more likely to report lower spiritual health than boomers. So there is a clear kind of unmet demand here, right? The global spiritual wellness market app is, the market for spiritual wellness apps, sorry, is kind of booming, projected to reach something like over $4 billion in 2030. But like we just said, apps don't necessarily solve the core issue. People need practices. They don't necessarily need more products. They need tools that help them find purpose, not just give them more content to consume. And the big driver here is really the overarching kind of decline of religion. Between 2010 and 2020, the number of religiously unaffiliated people rose by nearly 270 million. But this isn't really about abandoning spirituality. It's kind of about reimagining it. There have been quite a few headlines this year about how Gen Z is embracing religion, how they are more religious than their older counterparts. The research here is very inconclusive. In the main, this demographic does still follow this bigger trend. But interestingly, faith is being redesigned for digital native generations. So this is a design forward Bible. It's called a Bible BYBLE. And so it's kind of designed for younger consumers. It's designed to appeal to them a little bit more. And of course, right, new technologies have a way of changing how people seek guidance. And, AI and chatbots is no different, right? Bible Chat is a Christian app that has more than 30 million downloads. In China, people are using DeepSeek to try and decode their fortunes. These apps are attracting millions of dollars in investments. People are, paying in some cases up to $70 a year for their subscriptions. Many of these apps are now rolling out chatbots too. AI chatbots embedded in these could serve as kind of spiritual companions, private, stigma-free confidence that are always available. And even for people who are not using these apps, right? AI companions are providing this kind of always on sounding board, essentially, right? Over 70% of US teens have used AI companions, with almost a third saying the conversations are as satisfying as talking with their real friends. I mean, this jars a little bit with some of the things we were talking about in the previous trend, of course. But the truth is that people are kind of turning, in some cases, to AI companions. And for people who are comfortable sharing their personal thoughts with an AI, maybe spiritual seeking through these platforms is a natural extension. One final thing to mention, the Pew Research Center also found that nearly half of US adults say that they believe parts of nature mountains, rivers, trees can have their own spirits or spiritual energies. Now, this kind of view changes quite a lot from country to country. For example, only like 3 in 10 people in Poland say this. But this definitely kind of coincides with growing interest in things like dark sky travel, nature bathing, digital detox breaks, as people kind of engage and connect more with the natural world. So let's just look at a few innovations here. Let's go with SK Telecom, which is the middle one. So they recently opened something called a tea factory in Seoul. And it is all about connecting with Gen Z through AI installations. And one of the things that they have as part of the launch is an AI fortune photo booth, which is a mouthful to say. But basically, it's a kind of free tarot reading that then is automatically recorded and summarized in an accompanying app. And then also gives you things like photos alongside an AI horoscope and so on. It's just a fun kind of way to engage with a kind of traditional practice. And also, as part of the space, there are kind of K-pop role play games using VR. And so it's just an interesting way to kind of combine kind of culture, fandom culture, and spiritual seeking. And then kind of picking back up a little bit on what we were discussing about people looking to kind of reconnect with nature. Unplugged launched a wellness focused cabin that blends digital detox with health tech. So this is one of the kind of wave of travel companies that are helping people to go on holiday and, not spend all their time doom scrolling. But that doesn't mean that there is no tech. There is power to run devices that support people's health. So things like eating, movement, mindfulness, sleep. So whilst you have to lock your smartphone away, you can access kind of tech in the form of massage tools, for example, like the Therabody massage gun. And journaling kits, digital journaling kits, and kind of sleep tech that is designed to help you get a good night's rest. So it's all about thinking about, when tech can be used more mindfully to help people reconnect with themselves and, maybe escape from that burnout. So it's really, yeah, like I said, about, creating new conditions for personal rituals. They are removing distractions, but providing wellness tools. So it's kind of transforming downtime into intentional practice while teaching people what truly serves their well-being. And let's just take one more innovation. I'll go with the first one on this slide, Fern. Fern are a perfume company based in the UK, and they release their fragrances in tune with the natural calendar. So they release 4 scents a year on the solstices and the equinoxes. Now you have to apply for membership. Each perfume is blended and aged in Somerset, which is kind of a part of the UK that has a lot of local folklore and seasonal rituals. And they have kind of embedded that into a lot of their marketing as well. So they have a podcast, which sees up to, according to the brand, 70,000 monthly streams, that is very much all about helping people keep in touch with nature, talking about things like the skies, the rivers, and so on. And so it's just an interesting way to think about how traditional practices can be recombined in new contexts. They're like looking to Somerset folklore and repackaging it through the lens of fragrance. And so the full report also includes a few ideas about where this trend is heading, what it means when AI-guided reflection goes mainstream, and so on. So definitely lots more to explore in the full PDF. And with this one, the opportunity for brands isn't really to replace traditional sources of guidance, but to help people build their own meaningful routines. And, as you saw in the innovations, this shift does actually span quite a lot of industries. We saw SK Telecom. We saw Fern, a fragrance brand. Um, when you think about it, the common thread between those innovations isn't necessarily spirituality. In some ways, it's also personalization, right? In a world of, one size fits all wellness, people are looking for these approaches that resonate with their individual needs and values. So how will you help people build their own rituals? So that was a quick, well, not so quick, but a fairly quick tour through all three trend reports. Hopefully that has given you a lot to think about. And I would encourage you to go and on the platform find all three PDFs and download them in full because I didn't go into everything here as we discussed. But it appears that I was almost on time, so we should have time for any questions. So if I invite Julia back onto the virtual stage, I'm not sure if you've collected any questions for me or.
Yes, I do. And thank you, Vicky, for this presentation. I'm sure it gave everyone a lot to think about. It did give to me, so I have a lot of ideas right now. So just like to reinforce the invitation to go to the platform, download the PDF. There's a lot of to think on what does that imply and what opportunities that can bring to your brand. And also quick reminder, guys, you can also use the trend tailor to help fuel even more insights on industry takes and audience takes. But so let's quickly jump to our questions. The first one is, which of the three trends do you think will have the biggest impact on consumer behavior in the next 2 years?
Oh, good question. So I would say probably spontaneous is going to have the broadest commercial impact because it's probably the most universally applicable. Feels to me like every brand is thinking about how to create memorable experiences. And also the barrier to entry is lower as well. Thinking about how to add surprise is probably easier than trying to think more about, spirituality. Um, I would say Gather Ground probably needs more shifts in how brands think about community. And I would say a lot of brands are maybe not quite there yet. But it's kind of definitely the direction of travel. I also think the trends are a little bit interconnected as well, right? Spontaneous is all about memorable moments. Gather Ground is about, creating space for those moments to happen. And then Sacred Sync could be about giving them deeper meaning or things that people can take away with them so that it isn't just like a one-off thing. So maybe there is an opportunity to integrate all three as well. But if you were looking to one to start with, I would probably say spontaneous. Spontainment. Who names these trends, right? I should give them names I can pronounce.
You can go for the trend bingo and try to find to develop an innovation that checks all the three boxes.
Exactly. Yeah. And I would love it if someone thinks they've got an idea, they should share it with us.
Yes, please do. We'd love to hear about it. It's going to be really fun. So we do have one more question. How should brands measure success when they are enabling practices rather than selling traditional products? What metrics actually matter for these new approaches?
Oh, interesting. And I feel like if I knew the answer to this like perfectly, like that would be the $1 million the $1 million answer. Yeah, I think most brands are still sort of figuring this out. And traditional conversion funnels probably don't capture the value of someone building a meaningful ritual around your brand. But if you look at a brand like Fern, they have a podcast that they can kind of look at metrics from. They also, and I can't remember if I said this, but they also invite memberships. So that's also another thing. They put people on a wait list. So that's another way to kind of think about like how people are engaging. And Telfar, if you remember from the second trend where we talked about that kind of retail space that they had made, I guess there it's also about thinking about engagement depth rather than frequency. Maybe there's a way to think about tracking kind of retention over longer periods. and thinking about how people can build touch points into regular routines. I think really the businesses that are getting this right see higher lifetime value and maybe lower acquisition costs. I'm not like fully sure. But their metrics like might not be the sort of things that, you know, you would actually expect. Yeah, I think that's how I answer that one.
Amazing. Well, we're almost up with our time, so I just wanted to quickly thanks everyone that joined, took this time to dive deeper into these reports with us. Again, do go to the site, download the PDFs to go deeper into it. If you have any questions, I know that after sleeping on it, some questions might pop up, so feel free to reach out to us with any questions you might have after. And thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Julia, for being my co-host.
You're welcome. Quite happy to. Bye bye.
Bye, everyone.